guys, Mr. Halp here, and this is lesson 7G, and it is the final one regarding rhetorical analysis, really, for the year. As you can see here, it's specifically on the topic of revising a rhetorical analysis essay, and just really a hodgepodge of different things that if we haven't talked about it before, which we probably did, now's the best time for you to start thinking about them, because you're revising, you're considering everything that you've done, and you're asking yourself, is this going to be as effective as I want it to be? Is it going to be that 6 I'm hoping it is as well? So something along those lines, okay? So that's that in a nutshell, and let's see what we can make of this, if you don't mind, friends. So first thing is this, just revise, okay, always. Hopefully that's not something that I need to really tell you. Hopefully it's something that you do instinctively and naturally at this stage of your life. But just in case, you have been shortchanging your essays by not revising them, now's the time you really want to get into that, okay, particularly in this situation. Now, the thing to keep in mind is, yeah, we do understand that when you're taking the timed AP Lang test, if that's something that you're taking, you might not have time to do revising in the traditional method, but you're at least going to proofread, even if you can't revise it in a manner that, I'm referring to over the course of the next couple of minutes. So please just make sure that you're revising each and everything that you do all the time, making sure that you're doing it well. What do we mean by that, of course? Well, revising means preparing to make major changes and alterations. And like I said, it's preparing. It isn't necessarily going through with all of them, but asking yourself, are there any of those major changes and alterations that would benefit my rhetoric that I'm putting into this particular text? And, evaluating yourself, really sort of taking a step backwards and applying the same rubric that we've applied to sample essays during the course of the year to your own essay before you ever even show it to anyone else, and say, okay, what can I fix? What can I improve? What can I make different? As it says here, proofreading, remember, is just fixing the mistakes. Obviously, you should be fixing the mistakes. When I say revise, that doesn't mean, okay, well, that means you don't have to proofread. No, you're still proofreading. It's just that revising is a little bit more intense, requires a little bit more of a proactive step towards alteration than proofreading necessarily does. Proofreading, I'm assuming you already do that already, okay? But revising is taking a step back, like I said, and asking yourself what major changes you might be prepared to make. And, like I said, you can't rewrite an essay on AP Lang test day, okay? You just don't have the time to do that, all right? But there might be things that you can tweak to greater or lesser degrees that go above and beyond that concept of just mere proofreading, okay? Beyond that, we should talk about what we mean by revising. Furthermore, revisions mean revisions. In short, rethinking all of the information and rhetorical choices you have included in your rough draft and changing them if they aren't the best at achieving your goal. So nothing is sacred, nothing is permanent. Then, there's that whole concept in writing of killing your darlings. Okay, you put a lot of effort and hard work into something only to just rip it apart, destroy it, throw it out, all that stuff. Well, you need to be prepared to do that. And that's what good revising actually involves, okay? You're looking at it a second time. You're revisioning it, okay? And saying, well, if there's anything that could be better, then I'm going to make it better. If there's anything that I can chop out of this, then I'm going to chop that out of this, okay? And so on and so forth, all right? So, things that we should be doing in that revisioning process and asking ourselves, okay, is this the best that I can possibly do? First off, just reread your entire essay for comprehension. Does it make sense? Is somebody who isn't an expert, aka your reader, going to understand it as well as you understand it? Or are you maybe making some leaps that are a lot more challenging for the reader to maybe digest? And by that, we're referring to, of course, line of reasoning. Remember, lines of reasoning are connecting all the dots, going from evidence to claim and claimed thesis and all of that business. Okay, and making sure it's all united via your commentary that you've got embedded within your essay. Well, if those aren't clear, well, that's a problem. is the claim that you're actually making even defensible? Okay, and that can go in a couple different directions. Either there isn't sufficient evidence for the claim that you're making. It also could be that it's a claim that doesn't require defense. In which case it might be too general, it might be too obvious, not necessarily arguable enough to be worthy of our time and attention. And do your explanations make sense of the argument? Or can we walk away from this not necessarily understanding what your argument was or how you've communicated it, things along those lines? Okay, so you're rereading your entire essay and just saying, okay, is the audience going to get all the stuff that I'm trying to communicate in here? All right. Evaluate your introduction and thesis statement. So obviously, as you're doing this revisioning process, you're going to start, guess what, at the beginning, and you say to yourself, okay, specifically from the beginning perspective, is everything making sense here? Does my introduction communicate what it needs to? Does my thesis communicate what it needs to? If I walk away from reading your essay and can't tell you what the thesis is, that's a problem. You want to make sure it's clear. You want to make sure that it's obvious. You want to make sure that it's also addressing the prompt, whatever that prompt may happen to be. Now, certainly in a lot of cases with this whole rhetorical analysis business, it might just be asking you, okay, what are the rhetorical strategies that this person uses and how effective they are? Sure, but you need to make sure that it's nevertheless addressed. And as we've talked about previously, you don't need to restate the question right there in your introduction, but we need to know that it is relevant to it nonetheless, okay? Are you going beyond mere summary? I get a lot of introductory paragraphs that are just summarizing that text. You don't need to just summarize the text. You need to argue something about that text. You don't need to just summarize that text. So keep that in mind, okay? And is that introduction giving me some hint of what your overall structure is going to be like, okay? Does it give me all of the, at least a good sense of what the major claims embedded within your argument are going to be? Or am I still kind of blanking on that? I know what your thesis involves maybe, but I don't know what you're going to be saying about that thesis or how you're going to be proving it, things of that sort. Remember, your thesis statement itself and your introduction as a whole should give us some sort of a preview of what the overall structure of your argument is going to be. So you need to make sure that it's doing that, all right? Now, we get into the body paragraphs of your essay. Evaluate your topic sentences. Remember, we should be able to read the first or second sentence of every paragraph and say, okay, this is what this paragraph is about. This is what it's communicating. This is what it's claiming, things of that sort. Does each of those topic sentences support your thesis? Or do they maybe tangential in a way that's going to inhibit the rhetoric that you're utilizing? Okay. Are there bridges between your evidence and topic sentences in each paragraph? And that sort of harkens back to that concept of line of reasoning again. Okay, remember, you need to have sufficient commentary that takes the evidence back to the claim, which is in the topic sentence, and then that topic sentence back to the thesis itself. Okay, so if that line of reasoning is breaking down, well, then you've got a problem. Your topic sentences may be one of the prime reasons why that line of reasoning is breaking down. Okay. Take a look at your quotations, okay? Remember, we said that you should absolutely be using quotations in a rhetorical analysis because those quotations are your evidence. You're not synthesizing by looking at multiple different sources. You're not arguing something that you're supposed to have all of the information on already. No, this is rhetorical analysis. You can't analyze the rhetoric unless you're pulling quotations out of the original text. Do those quotations relate to both the claim and the claim in the topic sentence? So both the claim and the topic sentence. If they don't seem to do that, well, then you've got some dumped quotes that are a little bit irrelevant. Okay. The quotes that are the evidence. The evidence needs to support the claim. The claim is in the topic sentence, and the topic sentences all relate back to your thesis thanks to your good commentary. So remember that. Do you overuse quotes? Okay. Remember, too many quotes is just going to reduce your ethos in the grand scheme of things. So you want to have as many quotes as necessary to prove your claim and therefore to prove your thesis. But you don't want more than that, or you're going to verge on summary, which of course is a dirty word in this context. All right. You of course do need to evaluate your commentary, and this is, obviously this is such a big deal because it keeps coming back again and again and again and again and again. Does your commentary relate the quotations to the topic sentences? Is the commentary used to actively build that line of reasoning? Okay, quotes as evidence to claims in topic sentences back to the thesis itself. I've repeated that like 4 or 5 times now already today, but that's how big of a deal it is, okay? Is your commentary used sufficiently to draw connections with all evidence, or is some evidence maybe not utilized to the fullest or not connected to arguments that you're making in some way, shape, or form? So that's worth noting there, okay? Of course, you're going to take a look at your conclusion itself, okay? That final paragraph, which is a tricky one, just like the introduction. Does it explain why this analysis is important? Remember, you're looking for a big picture kind of summation of why this rhetorical analysis was relevant. Whether it's talking about the overall effect of it or the overall lack of effect of it, perhaps, maybe its relevance to the real world, something like that. And remember, that second question here is another way to think about that conclusion, which can do the same thing as you're looking for in A there. Does it connect this topic with the larger world or a broader context? Does it connect it to whatever the main issue of this rhetoric happens to be? Does it connect it in any way to a bigger concept of rhetoric in the real world or the media in the real world? Anything along those lines. Remember, yeah, it's going to some degree restate your thesis and to some very minor degree summarize what you've already told us, but that's not all that conclusion is doing. You need to give us some reason to take all that argumentation that you've used thus far and put it into a broader context, give it some importance and weight and heft and meaning, okay? And then, of course, proofread for spelling and grammar. Well, I already told you that. You just need to make sure that you're proofreading, okay? Are there any grammar, spelling, punctuation, sentence structure errors? I hope it goes without saying that if you had somebody revise or proofread your essay, you don't leave any comments or suggestions on the essay. That is one of the biggest fouls you could possibly have. Of course, we're talking about in a non-AP testing situation in this case. But you want to make sure that you've revised it, you've taken a look at any suggestions, you've fixed any of those mistakes that you might have made. Please don't ignore grammar check and spell check. They're there to help you. That doesn't mean that they're always right, but it always means that they should make you pause and ask yourself whether you want to change something. Because I get a lot of essays in my career that are grammar check and spell check shouting at people to say, this is wrong, and you know what? Grammar check and spell check is right, and the people just ignore them, okay? So like I said, it's not always right, but it's more right than sometimes students give it credit for, okay? Do you resort to any informal writing techniques? And we should clarify that, any inappropriate or unacceptable informal writing techniques. Do you use texting slang? Are you using any sort of colloquialisms that wouldn't make sense in this particular context? Okay? A great thing for you to do is to read that essay aloud to yourself, out loud. Does it sound right? I get a lot of things that people easily overlook because when they read their own writing, they're reading it in their own voice. And as a consequence of that, they don't pick up on the fact that there are some missing words or maybe extra words because they're reading it the way that they thought it out, and therefore everything sounds like it's making sense. But if you read it out loud, sometimes that forces you to see some of those problems or issues that would fall between the cracks when you're just silently reading it in your head. Any additional kinks you can iron out in diction and syntax, okay? Are all of the words the right words? Are all of the structures the right structures for your rhetoric, okay? Do you have all the necessary transitions that one should have to lead from one paragraph to another paragraph to another paragraph, one idea to another idea to another idea, so on and so forth? Or does it seem like there are some jarring shifts in content or tone or something along those lines? Those transitions are super important, and your graders are probably going to be looking for them, okay? If you can, obviously you can't on a day when you're taking the AP Lang test, step away from your essay for a period of time. This is something that I know a lot of authors do. I know that, for example, like Stephen King will say he puts it in a drawer for like 6 months or something like that before he pulls it out and starts looking at it again and like really revising it. Now, obviously, you can't do that in every situation, but you can do it in a lot of situations, okay? Wait a few hours, days, as long as you can, so that when you come back to it, you've almost forgotten what you said before, and that way you can look at it with a very fresh, clean, clear set of eyes, okay? And now that doesn't mean don't revise or proofread before then. That just means see if you can put a big chunk of time in between you and that final revision and proofreading, okay? And then, of course, you can reread one final time with that clear head. What small changes can you make, okay? Well, I guess we should also say what big changes can you make, because if you think that any change is necessary, you should do it, okay? But specifically, what small changes can you make? How is this reading less effective than your previous reading? Have you grown? Have you learned? Has the content or form that you've utilized in the past seemed less effective than the last time that you've addressed it? Because if that's what you're walking away from this thinking, then it might be a good idea to revise something a little bit more aggressively than you had originally planned. Okay, so these are all the big things that you should be thinking about as you're revising your rhetorical analysis essay. Of course, most of this lesson is really questions that you need to be asking yourself as you're rereading the text. But they're questions that hopefully you can answer and consider seriously, hopefully with a bit of detachment, so that, like we said, unfortunately, you're killing your darlings, because that's sometimes what it takes to make the best possible work of art that you can. So, as always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to bring them to class the next time I see you, and I will see you shortly, guys.